Evening all, my name is Jeff Carroll and I am with the city. I'm the Director of Engineering and Mobility for the city. We also have Cheryl Rogers on the call as well, who's our city engineer. We have kind of a brief presentation that we're going to go over for some Oak Park, and then we hope to have some good conversation about a couple kind of Oak Park items as well. So I know if you're not familiar with Zoom, it allows you to mute and unmute. So we just ask that as we talk to be considerate of others, and just mute if you have some background noise coming on, and then you can unmute if you have opportunity to speak as we go forward. So just as a quick history, I mean, we're talking Oak Park Drive. I'm sure everyone of you know where Oak Park Drive is. So it continues from Main Street all the way to Herf Road. We're going to talk really about two issues tonight, and that's the intersection with Schweppe Street here, where we have the circle, where the Bakery Lorraine is, and then further down on the east side, closer to Herf, kind of the parking issues and complaints the city's been getting about parking down on the east side of Oak Park. Give a brief update. We're continuing our sidewalk utility project. The water line between Raider and Fry is being replaced now. Sidewalks got added to Fry. Work continues to replace the driveways on Oak Park. The sidewalk extension along Bandera is the next phase. And once all the work is done, we'll sweep and clean the road, and we're going to chip seal the entire area, and we'll put new paint markers down. And we're estimating to complete it by the end of the summer is our current schedule for that project as well. Just a quick discussion on the history of Oak Park Drive. Oak Park was actually originally part of the old Spanish Trail, which connected Florida to California, went all the way from St. Augustine, Florida to San Diego with Kendall County and many other communities along the old San Antonio Trail. And actually Oak Park at one point in time was a highway department road. And so that's why, as a history, there were the two gas stations on Oak Park. And at one point they got tore down in the last year, but the motel was one of the old hotels at the entranceway to town. That Oak Park Drive was actually the main road in and out of Boerne for many, many years. Then as other roads got built, as the interstate got built in the 60s, just roads and traffic patterns have changed. So Oak Park is no longer the main entrance road in and out of town, and it's kind of turned back more into a neighborhood street as you guys have it today.
Yeah, right.
We'll talk some of the latest data, uses, and concerns that we've talked through. So as a city, we do traffic counts annually on kind of all of our major roads, including Oak Park. So that's the kind of black rubber hoses that you might see across the road. There's normally two of them kind of next to each other. Those allow us to measure cars, and it actually allows us to measure different axles and different configurations of vehicles that cross over them. Then it also allows us to measure speed between the two hoses. And so it's something we do annually on all of our major roads, and something as we see Oak Park, we've counted in 3 locations, kind of at Main Street, at 2nd Street, and at Herf Road. And as you see just general traffic patterns, and you have to remember that the 2020 year, that was back in the COVID days, there's a lot less traffic. There's a lot of people all over town. Our 2020 traffic counts were down. So this jump from 2020 to 2022, it looks bigger, but some of our 2020 counts are arbitrarily low. But if you see, there's a growing trend every year from 2020 to 22 to 23, that the traffic is growing on Oak Park. And many of you residents, we've heard from many of you telling us that you see more cars driving down Oak Park on a daily basis. And we have data, we can prove that we agree with you that there's more cars using Oak Park. We're seeing whether people are back road shortcut to Walmart, or whether people are trying to drive down Oak Park instead of sitting in traffic on River Road. There's probably a couple reasons why people are using Oak Park as a shortcut these days. Detour routes, as you know, when Main Street shuts down, for whether it's any of the mini parades. Oak Park is one of the primary detour routes. And like for actual events, and as I mentioned before, where drivers are just starting to use it as a shortcut, as we're observing right now. I mentioned the Sweppy intersection, when that old abandoned gas station has transformed and be redone into the Bakery Lorraine. There's a lot more people parking there, but there's also pedestrians from the neighborhood walking there, or just pedestrians parking and walking to Bakery Lorraine. So we're seeing a lot more pedestrian traffic in that area. We've been asked by several people about the potential of changing that to a 4-way stop sign. And so we've been doing some research on that. We've also been asked about additional areas of no parking in that general area of Bakery Lorraine. And I'm going to pass it to Cheryl Rogers, our city engineer. So she'll talk some of the details on what we do and how we determine stop signs for the city.
All right, so the graph that Jeff is showing on the page is a lot of data. But I'm going to give just a very quick high level on everything that we look at. Because we use this manual called the TMUTCD, and really it's just a traffic manual. And that establishes a warrant for what would warrant a 4-way stop. Because according to this manual, if you start adding 4-way stops where it's not warranted, it can actually create a more dangerous traffic situation because people aren't anticipating a 4-way stop. So what we look at is, first of all, crash data, and that is obviously crash data that's reported. So there may have been other crashes that happened at this intersection that weren't reported to the police department. But in the past 12 months, there haven't been any reported crashes at this intersection that we have record of. And then for the criteria 2 through 4 is really taking a look at traffic data. And so you're looking at the traffic for a major street, which is Oak Park, and then the minor street, which is Sweppy. And based on the traffic data, you have to warrant having a certain amount of traffic on both the major and minor street. And so according to this analysis, all the criteria 2 through 4 showed that the 4-way stop also was not warranted. So at this point, basically there's not enough traffic to warrant it, which is kind of the opposite of what you guys would want, because you want to make sure that the traffic stays low in this area. But if traffic continues to increase, which is not the hope, but if it does, we'll in the future look at the 4-way stop again and see in the future if it is warranted at this intersection.
Let us know when you're going to take comments.
Sure.
Okay.
Cheryl, do you want to talk through some of the other criteria as continuing beyond 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or?
Was just criteria 1 through 4 for this warrant. It's just 4 sets of criteria, so we're good on that.
Okay. And so then the other big topic that we've been receiving quite a bit of phone calls on the last handful of months has to do with Oak Park east of Fry, between Fry and Herf Road, is a parking issue. We get calls from people that kind of live on both sides, on the north and the south of Oak Park. And we getting calls from the people living in the cottages now. And so there's been concerns on Oak Park about how narrow it is in this particular section. It's narrower. We all know it's narrower in this section than it is in the main section of Oak Park. So there's a lot of cars between all the people in that area. There's a lot more cars that park on the road. So that's creating sight distance issues and some other complaints that we've been receiving. Cyclists, we've got complaints about cyclists that there's not rooms for them. So we've done our research as well. And as Cheryl mentioned earlier, the only data we have is accidents that do get reported to the police department. And so we went back and looked, and there have been a couple, but not many accidents in the area. But it's something we'll continue tracking for this particular area of accidents. One of the things we're kind of looking through for possible ideas and really wanted to talk with the community here for what we can do in those areas. Obviously for that parking area, one of the things is we could look at doing some limiting of parking on one side or the other, whether we limit parking completely, no parking on the north side or no parking on the south side, or we could look at little pockets of areas that we could stripe no parking one way or the other. So we can kind of have a little section of parking on the north side, a little section on the south side, and we can do some curb improvements and some other areas to look at what we can do to improve that because of the parking and the sight distance issues. And then some of the other things we've looked at is, so in general, the city of Boerne and staff and our police department and our fire department aren't big fans of speed bumps, but there's many other speed devices, and we'll call them speed tables. And there's some other speed items that we can look at to put on the streets that say at the intersections, at Schweppe or some of the other intersections, we could look at some other devices. And really the Boerne PD, the fire chief and the police chief that we deal with, and we have a kind of a monthly meeting with the police and fire and other people here at the city where we kind of talk over traffic issues. And so their big comment that they'll bring up is response time, and that they want, if people are calling 911, they want the fire and police getting there as fast as they can. And so there's concern on the chief side of response time. But there's also what we see frequently is basically you start putting speed control devices out and it creates alternate problems where now people might be driving more over on Hosack, or more cars will start driving down 2nd Street or 3rd Street. People will start coming up with detour routes to get around the speed bumps. And so what we see is we're just pushing traffic to different areas. So that's one thing that we'll kind of look at in more detail as we talk with you and kind of talk suggestions. But really, as I mentioned, speed tables, which is you see those, there's a handful of places in San Antonio that I can point to, or some of those projects. So it's really, if you could picture the crosswalk itself, like the width of a crosswalk, it'd be a really long speed bump that we can kind of build in and make the crosswalks a lot more visible and make it where it's a speed table, where it makes it a lot more noticeable and visible for where the pedestrians would be crossing. And it's really, so that was one idea that we had looked at, and the city will continue talking. But then really we just wanted to use this forum tonight to get a lot of notes and comments and let you guys hear what comments you might have and what visions you guys might have for Oak Park itself. We wanted to get some community input there. So at this point, that's kind of the end of my slides, and we'll just kind of go in a hopefully a nice discussion format where we can all talk together and kind of talk what we want to see on Oak Park.
Okay,
Dr.
my name's
Fowler,
Tom. Brian, you want to go first?
No, it didn't matter. Just go ahead.
My name's Tom Carlson. I live in the Oak Park cottages. My concerns are twofold: is the cars that seem to be speeding from Herf to Fry Road. If we could have some traffic enforcement, it'd be helpful. The other thing that I suggested to Councilman B.O.N.D is in the area in front of how we exit onto Oak Park, I suggested, like they did at Bakery Lorraine, that you paint yellow lines on the sidewalk from our wall that is the property line on one to the other, and have no parking signs, so that we can have the ability to have a clear line of sight, because it's very, very difficult. And it's just a matter of time before somebody's going to get hit. In fact, we did have an accident about a month or two ago around 10 o'clock at night. A guy came down, he hit the pickup truck that's usually blocking on the left. Boerne police came. I think he was probably arrested for drunk driving, but that's just an example of, they fly from Herf Road to Fry, and speed bumps would be great if the traffic study doesn't warrant something else, but some way to slow them down. Thank you.
Brian Fowler here over at 441 Oak Park. I think when I think about what you're talking about, there's, I think you have to look at long-term effects and what you're really thinking about. Yes, we can look at numbers of traffic counts today, but let's also keep in mind that we're predicting somewhere between 20 to 40,000 people being added to the Boerne area over the next 10 to 15 years. Given the fact that they want to take the shortcuts and the fastest way there, not only do you have to look at your numbers today, but you also need to be projecting about where things are headed. We only let algorithms guide our decision making. You're always going to be behind your problems. So given that orientation, when we first look at the 4 stops at Schweppe and Oak Park, my concern there is that your algorithms only look at car traffic. And you also have to consider pedestrians, cyclists, baby carriages. I mean, you have to look at the whole gamut. You have to also look at the concentrated amount of transportation that occurs there at that intersection, secondary to the commercial development. It's becoming a very well-trafficked area, certainly, between 11 and 1 at noontime, and certainly in the early mornings around 10. So I don't think you'll find many individuals, and while we have this Zoom meeting today, I think in the future, even a face-to-face meeting with the Oak Park community needs to happen, because an opportunity needs to be given so that we can illustrate what the real concerns are. And we'll see what we find out today. But I do think that 4-way stop sign at that intersection is very critical. It's needed now. If you wait on your algorithm, then you're going to wait on your multiple accidents to happen. So that's something that we discuss. And I'll leave it there, and I'll talk about the other sections of Oak Park later.
Thanks, Brian. Anyone else or any other comments? And we can just continue to talk just about the Schweppe intersection, and then we can go talk about the other side, the parking.
This is the opportunity to speak up.
This is Tom. I'll speak again. I don't know if you guys have, and I appreciate you guys providing this information, but I don't know if anybody's really sat there for any length of time, let's say between 4 and 6, between Herf and Fry, or in the morning. But you see school buses coming down, they're having trouble getting by there. I would imagine, police and ambulance would have trouble getting by there. And it just is so narrow at that length of road between Fry and Herf, and then the people speeding, that I agree with Brian. I think you need to go look at this, and we can, I know how you do the traffic. You put the black things down and they measure the count, and that's fine. But I think we need to put some eyes on it. And I also appreciate Brian's idea that maybe you all get together and have a constructive meeting at some point, so that other people who couldn't be on today could join.
No. And I know one of the other places, I know noise isn't something that's been brought up, but I know Dr. Fowler and I have talked noise before too. One of the other areas, so we do have speed, I'm gonna call them bumps, on West Hosack and over on East Bandera. And one of the things that we've, in talking to the residents over there, one of the things is that some people do actually slow down. Some people will continue driving over them, but that creates a noise as well. But the other part of it is we've heard people complaining, and we've had noise conversation, and there's a noise committee right now. If people do, some of the people that do slow down, then when they go over the speed bump, the trucks and little cars and everything else like that are making so much noise, they'll accelerate to get over past the speed bump. And then they make a lot of noise afterwards as well. So I don't know if that's something you guys on Oak Park, with all the traffic you're seeing, are you seeing a lot of noisy vehicles as well? That's something we're not seeing as many complaints on as elsewhere in town, but wanted to kind of get some feedback on that as well.
The noise is horrendous. I was part of the when we had a noise ordinance put in, I was one of the ones who brought that about. And noise ordinances are only as good as they're enforced. I think we'd be hard pressed to ask our police force, are you going to enforce noise ordinances on streets? And these trucks, and primarily the Mustangs and the trucks, seem to be the loudest. And I have thought about the same thing. When you had a speed bump, they slow down, and then past the speed bump, they push on the gas and make the noise. So I do understand that to be a potential problem, and so it has to be certainly discussed.
For example, your location, Dr. Fowler, is right at the stop sign. So is that
Right.
something, do you think you hear more because you're at the stop sign?
Oh, no doubt about it. And it's massive. And you know, it's gotten to be more than I ever expected. And I also didn't realize that many vehicles were sold that had that kind of exhaust system. But anyway.
I bet they're not sold like that. I bet it's.
Yeah. I think the thing that I'm concerned about on the lower part of Oak Park is children playing in the streets. And with parked cars and the number of kids that live along there, you know, that scares the living daylights out of me. But I'll tell you, one of the arguments that fire and police use about EMS vehicles and the need is, when I've observed ambulances and fire trucks coming down Oak Park, I would say over 90% of the time they take a right on Fry Street heading south. I've very seldom ever seen EMS. Now, I've seen it, but I've very seldom ever seen it go down the lower part of Oak Park. So if fire and police use that, and they always have that in their, when they're arguing, they can always say, well, we're saving lives, and so we can't be slowed down. Well, I'm sorry, over 90% of your runs are bypassing that lower segment of Oak Park. I don't think it's slowing down that many runs. And if they use that as an argument, I think you can look at their own numbers and prove that it's probably a weak argument. If you wanted to put some type of device to slow traffic down. I do believe that people stay away from roads that have bumps, because I watch my own behavior. And so Bandera, I always turn down Schweppe or Second to avoid the bumps.
This is Tom again. The other thing is, I haven't noticed along anywhere from Herf up Oak Park all the way to Main Street, if there are any speed limit signs, they're few and far between. I haven't checked all of them, but I don't think there are any along that street. If there are, there's maybe one. So that wouldn't be a bad idea either, to remind people it's probably 30, you know, it's a thickly settled area or whatnot. So
I think the speed limit, and I think you have to remember that Oak Park is not a designated thoroughfare, and that means something for development.
Absolutely.
And so everyone needs to understand that this is still designated a residential street. And because it's not a thoroughfare, we have more options. We're not as restricted. And I also question the speed limit that we have currently on Oak Park. I think it's too fast.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tristan Wiggins here. If I can just speak to, you know, all the concerns. I mean, my wife and I actually live on that section between Herf and Fry, 608. So we're bang in the middle. We've lived on that, in that house for 6 years. So we've seen a lot of change, and it's, most recently, it's actually become a nightmare. As far as the speeding, I mean, the minute a vehicle enters from Herf going up to Fry, they just seem to think it's a racetrack. I mean,
Amen.
it's pedal to the metal, to the fastest they can get to that four-way stop at Fry. And I'm outside a lot. I mean, I do a lot of yard work, so I'm out there, you know, all the sort of peak times. And with the speeding comes the noise. I mean, you've got the, you know, the big trucks, you've got the souped up cars that are, you know, blaring their way up there. Talking to a little bit about the accidents, my next door neighbor, Ian, who is the head brewer at the Duck, his vehicle is the one that was recently involved in that accident, but that same truck has actually been hit twice by vehicles heading up the street. Both him and I have had to peel dead cats off the road being hit by cars. We've seen multiple near hits with pets and children. I mean, especially on the other side of the road where we've got the, I guess you'd call them condos, there's lots of kids there. So, I mean, the minute a ball goes in the street, I mean, you know, every time it's a near miss. And honestly, if the city and we don't do something about it, unfortunately, when something terrible happens, it will be on us. Because the volume of traffic and the speed is just, you know, it's really got out of hand. So as far as the volume of traffic, speed, that needs to be addressed. The parking, the only thing I would say on our side of the street, obviously we're full on houses. So, you know, we're slightly bigger than the condos on the other side of the street. With that being said, the condos, on some of them, there may be some multi-family. So that is why there's a lot of vehicles parked on that road, on that side of the street. So obviously, there definitely needs to be something done about that. But here's the problem I've run into. If we take sections of no parking and we eliminate the parking on the street, if we don't do anything about the speed, I think the vehicles will just go even faster because they're only slowing down because of the obstructions, essentially. So, you know, that's the major issue I see with that. The lack of police presence. I mean, like I said, I've lived here for 6 years. I've maybe seen a cop sit on the intersection of Fry maybe 5-6 times. I mean, if there was actually a cop that sat on this road, he would be able to stop a lot of people all the time. So a little bit of background about me. I'm an operations manager for a road construction company. So I do lots of TCPs for my company all over the States. And I've obviously seen a lot of, you know, streets, a lot of volume of traffic, a lot of ways to sort that out. I mean, obviously, I like the idea of the flat tabletop speed bumps. That way, it's not such an obstruction, but it's just enough. Maybe potentially, maybe we look at something like rumble strips at the, you know, closer to the four-way, closer to the traffic lights, maybe something like that. I do think we need to see a drop in the speed limit.
Amen.
I mean, what is it right now, Jeffrey? Do you know? Is it 35?
Cheryl, do you have that information, or even from the counts, what speeds we're observing on our counts?
Yes, so the speed limit right now is 30 miles an hour.
Okay.
And so this is from our counters that we're at. It's a good mid-block area between 2nd and 3rd Street. And that is showing that the average speed limit is 29 miles an hour. But a lot of what we look at is what's called the 85th percentile speed. And that's the speed at which 85% of the vehicles are at or below. So that speed, 85% of the vehicles are at just under 33 miles an hour or below.
Right. I guess.
Just under. If you're not speaking,
I would like to add one additional thing. That when I'm driving from Herf Road to Fry, it's like playing chicken with all the cars that are driving. And since I have a smaller car, the other vehicles expect me to move over, but I see their mirrors are actually over the yellow line. And if I don't move over, they're going to hit me. And I go through up to Fry or from. And I go through that every time, whether I'm in cottages down Herf Road. I go through the same thing. So there's just not enough road. I go through the same thing. So there's just not enough room for two cars to pass, especially bigger cars or vehicles like buses and vehicles of that nature. vehicles of
So
that.
I think I got everyone, I think I heard most of you, but yeah, we're getting a lot of feedback. So if you're not speaking, could you please mute your microphone? There should be a button that says mute your microphone. That'll help us prevent the feedback. So I think I heard most of that, Perry. I don't know if you could repeat some of the main points.
Hello, my name is Betty Gardner, and I live at the Cottages in Oak Park, and I would like to just express what I have observed. The parking situation in front of what the previous gentleman referred to as condos or multi-family residences along there. Those residents have parking available behind their residence. That portion of the street is constantly filled with people are using that area to park while they go to their jobs daily. I have seen them arrive, take cleaning equipment out of their trucks and out of their trunks and get in another vehicle to go off to work. So that section of the street during the day is a constant parking lot. I would like to favor no parking on the north side of the street, as I believe that those people are really not residents that are parking there as a majority.
Yeah.
And to confirm, are you saying you would request no parking on the apartment side or the cottage side?
No, the apartment side, or
On the south side?
I don't know if you want to say they're condos, they're multifamily.
Right, okay.
dwellings.
So on the south side.
I believe they're on the north side of the street.
On the cottage side, what I proposed was just to have no parking on the property line of the cottages. So where the stone wall begins by Ian's house to our entrance, then past our entrance to the end, so that we have a line of sight to get out, because this isn't going to get solved very quickly, but someone's going to get hit, and it isn't going to take very long, because like to Perry's point, they come flying up, you can't see them. And you've got to inch out, and try to get your car out far enough. I sent some pictures to Councilman Bodie so he could see as well.
I totally agree with that. I'm just saying what I've observed about the cars that use the other side as a daily parking lot.
Tristan,
Hello?
back here quickly. Is it Cheryl with the city? Is it?
Yes.
Cheryl, I guess what I'd like to see, if possible, is if we could get get the speed counter set up halfway between, basically, essentially on my property line across the street because we're basically halfway between Herf and Fry, and get a speed on that area, because that's where I'm seeing the faster speed limits for sure. So if there's something we could do that in the future, that'd be definitely appreciative.
Yes, we can do that, because I was looking at the location for where we had set up the 2 counters, and it was pretty close to Herf. And so the speed we got from that was pretty low, because I think it wasn't capturing people's speed mid-block, which is going to be a lot higher.
Yeah.
Still accelerating where we had put the counters, because we were just counting traffic. But yeah, in the future, we'll definitely put it more mid-block to make sure that we capture the speed as well, an accurate reading on the speed.
So
Yeah,
one quick question is, have you all noticed a big difference in traffic with school being out? Most of our town is very school traffic dependent, where the traffic really decreases. Is Oak Park in general stayed the same? Has it decreased? Because if we put the counters out, we don't want to.
Yeah.
Something where it's a lot lower than normal.
I'd say it's definitely decreased. But I mean, to get an accurate reading, I mean, obviously we need to do it when school's in. I mean, school's only out for 3 months of the year. So, that's a very small time period of less traffic. So maybe once school's back in session, I mean, especially the peak times, dropping off kids, picking up kids.
And that's
And,
also, I would comment some of our other places in town, it's directly the high school traffic. And I'm going to say it's the high school drivers that are driving to and from high school are causing a lot of our speed issues and other places.
Yeah.
Down, and it could be that same place.
Yeah. When I look directly at these drivers that are speeding right in front of my driveway, they actually all adults, unfortunately.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Very, very
Problem,
rarely
right?
they're kids. They normally workmen or just adults in general. And then another thing I just wanted to quickly add, and then I'll let everyone else have a turn, is just the amount of heavy traffic going up and down the street. I mean, with tandem trailers. I mean, it's just insane. I mean, the road is already narrow as it is, and we've got these heavy, F-350s with tandem trailers coming up and down, up and down. I mean, there needs to be something, I think, that could be done with sort of heavy, even if it's done by weight or I don't know, per axle, something like that would also help, I think.
Sure. So I'll chime in there, and that's it's something I can do quickly. So on the next council meeting, which is next week, the city of Boerne does have a truck ordinance, and it's been pretty old. It's been many, many years or decades since it's been updated. So we're looking at updating that at the next council meeting, and we are adding Oak Park to that list.
Okay.
Of streets that basically will allow for, it'll allow for local traffic, but it's the way it's written. And again, in the grand scheme, it's a new rule, and it's going to take enforcement, unfortunately, like anything else. But it'll be one other thing that we can add, that through trucks shouldn't be using Oak Park. But then if it's someone doing a local, and there are a lot of houses that are being rebuilt, and you have construction, you have a lot of activity in general, which is great as we see Oak Park kind of redevelop, let alone our city project. But I mean, so some of that is local traffic, but I think there's a lot of people using it as a shortcut as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I know we had talked about truck traffic. Oak Park and Fry from at least Bandera onward needs to have that also applied. Thank
you, Brian.
One of the things that I also am concerned about, and I think Tristan had mentioned it, you need to look how the wording is on the truck rules, because what I'm seeing is these trailers that are coming through. So I think that if you limit, I'm just not sure how it's worded, but you need to look at that where trailer related large vehicles with trailers also needs to be. We know there's lawn equipment people and things like that. And you know what? If they're going to a destination, then yeah, no one's going to harp on that or have a big problem. But we know that the majority of this is just flashing through. I mean, when you see food delivery trucks and other trucks, I saw an 18-wheeler the other day turning off of the lower park of Oak Park, turning left onto Fry, took out a huge limb of an oak tree. The school bus was sitting there. The school bus had to back up. I mean, it was a mess. And of course, this was a month or two ago, or a month ago. It's just crazy. And I see them all the time. So one of the things I was going to ask in this meeting is, I know I'd mentioned to you, I'd really love it if police and fire could be part of the discussion. And I don't know if any of those representatives are on this meeting today. If not, they need to come in and really understand the discussion and hear what the residents have to say.
So yeah, we're recording the meeting, and so that's something, and we'll take notes and give recording. But yeah, it's definitely something that we're coordinate with fire and PD on.
Hello.
Yes, Susan.
Hi, I live on Oak Park in between Fry and Herf. And the parking thing, from what I understand on those condominiums, their HOA said that each apartment is only allowed 2 parking spaces in the back. All the rest have to park in the front. Therefore, because they all used to park in the back, but they made them change that. Also concerning the traffic, what's going to happen? First of all, they put in the cottages. You're building those 6 houses on Fry Street, Sienna Courts. You're putting up that academy thing on Herb Road.
That's what.
How are you going to solve that traffic coming in and out of Oak Park? Because now you're going to have a bunch more children, people, families coming in. And the parking, as far as if everybody parked on the south side of the street, my neighbor loves to park his cars in his front yard. I believe there is a city ordinance against doing that, but it continues to be done. I complained. Nothing has ever been done. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
I'm Amy Bean, and I am joined late, but I did hear the discussion via the phone, and I just wanted to reiterate my concerns more from a pedestrian point of view. I walk a lot. My dogs, I take care of my grandson. I take care of my grandson 3 days a week, and the traffic has gotten so bad, and the safety of just pushing a stroller around and walking the dogs, I've even thought of moving. So it's really a serious concern. And so I'm just going to express my concerns that the pedestrian issue needs to be addressed, as well as the traffic and the speed limit. I am supportive of speed bumps, speed tables. I don't know what Texas law is on cameras, but I lived in Virginia and they used to have cameras for speeders. And put it in residential areas, I'm not against it. I want something to slow these people down. And so that's just my concern and my 2 cents. It's from a pedestrian standpoint. The thing about we only do tables, I don't like that idea. No, you need to slow these people down. If that means bringing the speed limit down, if that means speed bumps, if that means cameras, if that means police presence, if that means those little things where they tell you what your speed is and what it should be, you know, those little signs they put up, just do something. Saying one answer, a table, is not adequate.
No, yeah, there's many different devices, yeah, that kind of speed calming, because in reality, what we see is if people are comfortable driving a road at a certain speed, they're going to drive that speed no matter what sign we put up. So that's where all these speed calming things are kind of making. And it's interesting that we do see so much speeding on the part east of Fry, where it is so much tighter and in my mind uncomfortable. I don't like driving through there sometimes because it's tough to drive through. As opposed to the rest of Oak Park, where it's so big and wide, we see a lot of people speeding over there. But it's basically, if you make people uncomfortable, they'll kind of naturally slow down. And so that's something that we can look at. There's all sorts of different things that we can do with curbs and striping and other things that we can do to try to make it where people naturally slow down.
Well, I think that's critical. And I think it's got to be the side streets too. Like you said, people will go over to Second, they'll go to Roosevelt. I'm at Second and Roosevelt. I see it. I get it. I understand, but we've got to, it's not just Oak Park. This whole situation has to be addressed in the neighborhood. And like I said, I have seriously thought of moving because of the safety concerns for my grandchildren. So that's my 2 cents, and I appreciate this time very, very much.
Thank you.
I have 2 additional comments. One is I am rather appalled by the lack of police presence, knowing that we have an issue. You know, this is not new. This is well known. And seeing a car and checking speeds, literally creating at least a psychiatric presence for cars, knowing that it's a quote speed trap, can have an incredible lessening of speed, but they're never there enough or often enough to even create any kind of concern by the driver. That's one concern, and that's why the police need to be involved in the discussions. The next one is, I notice a lot of people are talking about painting the curbs yellow or trying to keep people from parking. If you look at the new townhouses behind the bakery where they put up the pylons to keep people from parking next to their place, well, some of those are painted yellow. People go to Bear Moon on Main Street. People don't look at yellow and say, I won't park there. They've been parking at the yellow spots forever, blocking, getting onto Main Street from Tyson there. So putting the yellow around the commercial bakery, putting the yellow near the entrance and out of the cottages will not be adequate and will not do the trick. People don't pay attention. They either have to be red, and I'm sure there's some rule about what can be red and what can't. So you're going to have to come up with a better way. And maybe it's you outcrop the curb and you don't even allow parking, and you make the road, in other words, you create outcropped curbs for periods of time and then go back to parking. In other words, you really direct where parking can
No,
happen.
yeah, you can do that kind of at the intersections where like the street width is defined or with that parallel parking. Yeah, so you bring the curb lines in to remove that parallel parking from that area. That's definitely something you can do. And so, yeah, in general, there's different laws on different curb colors, but the easy way to say it is yellow is enforced by the PD and red is enforced by the fire, and you can't paint it red unless it's a specific fire code requirement. Is the way our laws are. And again, it goes back to enforcement. We have a lot of yellow curbs and we have a lot of issues on Main Street and by Daily Grind and by Bear Moon and other places where it's a constant issue. And it's put signs and we can do all sorts of stuff, but yeah, people will still park there.
So
Start writing tickets.
yeah, Jeffrey, I mean, it seems to come down to the main issue is that there's not enough enforcement from the police department. I mean, it's all good doing all these changes, but if no one's going to enforce them, that really won't make a difference. I mean, there needs to be, active police presence. And the great thing about that is it can start tomorrow. I mean, we can get the cops, just even if they're patrolling the neighborhood a little bit more, or just sitting for 5 minutes, or it's just creating that, like Brian was mentioning, just a known police area, a known police presence area. Because I think it does, it starts there. And I think that's where we need to have the police presence. And then once we do that, we can bring in all these traffic implements to slow people down. And then the parking situation. But I think the police presence is a huge thing, and it really would make a difference. And that thing could be implemented tomorrow, like I said.
Yeah, I'll definitely send a message to the police chief tonight, and so I'll send a message as well, and that's something we'll bring up to our council members as well.
Thank you, Jeff.
Something that we're hearing from the citizens that we guys want more police presence, and I will comment that I know. The police department is at full staff, and it's been a couple years plus that they've been at full staff. So that's something new recently that hopefully they might be able to have some more availability to get out there.
Perfect.
And
Thank you.
So I've attended some other neighborhood meetings where PD was present. And I know what they've said, because in every community, everyone's concerned about speeding. It's just the nature of humans that we don't follow rules, it appears. But what PD has said in other meetings is that, of course, they can come in certain areas, but the enforcement, the speeding will get better when they're there, obviously, but a couple days after they leave, people just go back to speeding, and they don't have the staff to have a cop in all the areas of town. It's a lot. We have a lot of streets to cover with the staff that they have. And so that's just the response that they've given to other neighborhoods. And I think they would probably be willing to come out absolutely to Oak Park and start making more rounds to Oak Park, but they're not gonna be able to make, I don't know, have a constant presence, I guess, because they can't have a constant presence everywhere. But we'll definitely reach out to them.
Jeff? Yes, this is Charles Roberts, and I live right across the street from Brian on 442 Oak Park.
Yes, sir.
And we certainly concur with all the comments that the participants have made. It's interesting, we were sitting here watching out our front window and observed a car speeding right through the traffic, right through the stop sign here at Oak Park and Fry. And I had spoken with one of the police officers recently about patrol here, and they indicated that they had knew about some of the speeders, and a lot of them, they were kind of watching the high school kids. But I think one of the other gentlemen made the comment, we noticed a lot of the speeding goes on with pickup drivers that are really adults. And I don't know if that's just the power of a pickup or what, but that's one of the things that always concerned us, is that the speed of these pickups around here definitely exceeding a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit.
Another thing too, I hate whenever when you're casting a net and you're looking for ideas, the worst thing you can do is to make the net so small that you don't think of everything. And so what I like to do is throw out crazy ideas, and not that I think that they'll happen, but you never know until you throw it out there. I mean, if your problems become so significant and the traffic becomes so crazy here, I mean, would there ever be a decision by the city to just cut off Oak Park at Herf and say, nope, it's not a way to get off of Herf anymore. You have to go down to where Herf goes.
Well, just with that, Brian, I actually do have an out there, solution. I mean, whether it happens or not, but we could certainly do like a one way going from Herf to Fry. So
Yeah.
Traffic can move freely going north on Oak Park, but traffic coming down Oak Park must turn right on Fry and exit and do all their business on Herf and Old San Antonio. And that's why those roads have been widened. I mean, because they can handle the traffic volume. Oak Park can't. But it is out there. I understand that. But we could certainly, one way from Herf to Fry only, and then that way, that will stop the traffic volume right there. But obviously emergency vehicles can go the way they want all the time, but just a one-way section from Herf to Fry, I think it could work.
No,
I
that's,
think it's something that you have to consider, and you need to allow yourself to think outside of the box on this one, Jeff.
oh yeah, definitely agree. And I know, so from sitting through years worth of the transportation committee meetings as well, is something that roundabouts are becoming very popular now. And it's something for the Oak Park Fry intersection, because of the old cutbacks, and there's some extra right of way in there. That's something that we've been looking at for roundabouts at some of the major intersections, but also smaller roundabouts. It's kind of smaller intersections. So that's something we're looking at on several places in town now for roundabouts. That's something we can look at. Could we take one of those major intersections and turn those into roundabouts? Again, trying to make alternative things that we can come up with.
I understand roundabouts to be a answer for controlling some of the backup of traffic and so forth. Is our problem the backup of traffic at Fry and Oak Park? What is the problem you're trying to solve with a roundabout at that intersection?
Well, the other thing, that roundabouts are very much safer for pedestrians. So going back to the comments earlier of pedestrian safety, the roundabouts really control the number of interactions from vehicles to people and or bikes. And so that's something that one of the roundabouts do, and just kind of minimize. But also I would say that if you're having people speeding from Herf to Maine, again, trying to come up with ways besides just putting a whole bunch of stop signs up. What other ways can we do that? Like, I don't want to drive down that road. I got to go through all those roundabouts. So I'm going to go drive down some other road. I'm just going to go stay on River Road. So just things that we can do that keep people figuring out which road to choose.
Yeah. Jeffrey, obviously, I'm from South Africa and from the UK, so we have a million roundabouts. The only problem with a roundabout is if there's no traffic, it's a yield. It's not a stop. So if the traffic going up from Herf up Oak Park sees no traffic in the roundabout, they're just going to maintain that speed and go right on through. You stop. You take away that stop sign. You're essentially putting a yield. That's the only concern I'd have.
Yeah, I would be hesitant to think of a roundabout at that intersection, personally. I think you have to start creating different ways to make this, I think what you have to think about is, do you want Oak Park to continuously become a thoroughfare? Because that's what it's going to be. It's going to increasingly become a more, and I want to know, is the gut feeling of the city, I want to know right now, is Oak Park seen kind of like John's Road and School Road? We know that there's these certain streets that in the master plan, there is an idea about transportation and solving the problems and access points to downtown. I really need to know if the city sees Oak Park as a huge relief thoroughfare, and we want to kind of control it, but we don't want to disrupt it too much because it's too important for the city. If that's the orientation of the city, then I'm going to have a much bigger bone to pick about where they're headed with this street. Because right now, this street, we need to decide, is it residential or not?
So,
If it's
so I'll
residential,
comment.
let's treat it that way.
I'll comment real fast. So as some of you may know, we updated the thoroughfare plan earlier this year. We spent a year and a half plus working with consultants and had public open houses and did a lot of updating to the major thoroughfare plan, which that was an update from the previous 2019 plan and many updates before that. We've been doing major thoroughfare plans for a long time. But Oak Park was not classified. So you mentioned a handful of other streets that we do have classified. So School and John's and a lot of those other Adler, Esser, obviously Herf are roads that are classified on our major thoroughfare plan, which is a map that people can go find online. But we did not classify Oak Park in that system. So that new thoroughfare plan that we just got approved a couple months ago, Oak Park is no different than 2nd Street or any of the other kind of neighborhood streets in your area.
I'd also be interested in comparing Fry Street to Schweppe as far as numbers. We have a 4-way stop sign, and I know that in the past in our city, many things were done not based on algorithm, not based on numbers. Sometimes it was based just on public demand or by request, and somebody gave it to them. And I know that precedent isn't always a great way to justify the next move. However, I look at Fry and Oak Park in this intersection, and then I look at Schweppe and I look at these numbers that are here. If you really looked at the traffic count on both sides of Fry from Oak Park, I would argue that you might see a very similar number count on Schweppe and Oak Park. And definitely we need a 4-way stop here at Fry and Oak Park. But what I'm getting at is, if those numbers are anywhere near close to being similar, that's the justification why you need to go with Schweppe and Oak Park, and realize that you have increasing pedestrian traffic, bicycle traffic happening there. You have cars parked all the way up to the corner on that 4-way area. People are inching out 6, 7, 8 feet into Oak Park to see if that car coming from Main Street, coming over that hill, if there's a car in front of the bakery coming that way. And it is not easy. So if you don't put red curbs and block the parking on that corner, you are going to have to put a 4-way stop sign there. You're going to create a huge potential problem. I'm going to encourage you not to wait to the type of fatalities and near misses we've had with pedestrians on Main Street, where we know we need crosswalks. You know, I know how hard we had to fight for the lights over on Blanco to get the lights and the cross at Old Number 9. I've heard all the justifications and all the hesitations for why things are done. We're talking about a simple 2 additional stop signs at Schweppe and Main Street. I don't think that's asking a huge amount, and I don't think you're going to have a public outcry if you put them there. And I'm asking you to really second think this need to only go by algorithms for justifying those stop signs.
Jeff, this is Lila Reed, and we're at 442 Oak Park. Why is I'm getting a feedback. Anyway, I
Do
just
you have
want,
like a phone and your computer going at the same time, maybe?
no, there's two phones.
Can you
Okay.
Turn off one of the phones, or you have two phones maybe?
Or just turn it down. I just want to agree with Brian about the four-way stop. And I agree with everybody else about her.
Thank you. And yeah, so again, we're just trying to get a feedback of the community, what everyone wants to hear. So yeah, definitely if there's a lot of people that are interested in the four-way stop sign, yeah, just please let us know.
And
Jeffrey,
Brian, sorry, go ahead.
just last two questions. The chip seal that's going to be done after this program, is that going to run all the way to Huff?
Cheryl, can you chime in on the limits of that from the project?
Yes, that is the plan at this point. We're chip sealing a couple streets in town, so we need to make sure that we have enough in order to do that. We are prioritizing Main to Fry because that area is going to be restriped to add parking lanes and bike lanes in a center line.
Right.
So we need to get the chip seal done before we stripe that. But that is the plan. And
Right.
what I'm hoping we'll have enough material in order to do all of it.
Okay, yeah, I certainly hope so, because just on my section, the chip seal is just raveling up all over the place. And we've got essentially no center strip anymore because of all the speeding traffic. I mean, because the majority of traffic on our section drives up the middle. So, I mean, at the very least, our section needs to be restriped for sure.
Well, yeah,
Okay.
that's definitely something we can look at if we're not chip sealing, we can easily go and restripe. It's something that we don't like to go restripe right before we go chip seal and have to restripe again.
For sure.
It's one of the reasons it's probably a little faded because we have a 10-year pavement maintenance plan. And so it's something that we try to stripe and keep stuff before we pave it over.
But yeah, I mean, preference to having a new chip seal course, obviously.
Yep, understood completely.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And Brian, I was just going to comment, you had mentioned wanted to know the difference in traffic at Bryan Oak Park versus Schweppe and Oak Park. It's actually pretty significantly different. So at Fry, we measure based on like the peak hour. So the highest volume hour we measured on Fry was around 1,300 vehicles northbound coming into that intersection. Both ways of traffic, and then Schweppe was around 94. So just wanted to give you that data because I had it in front of me.
And it's very interesting to look at the three calculations points. And I think Dr. Fowler, you and I talked about it, that I think it's the Walmart traffic that we're seeing a dramatic difference on one side of Oak Park than the other side. And I think it's people coming from Herf, coming down Oak Park, but then cutting over on Second. Over to Walmart or to West Bandera. They're using that as kind of a cut through, but it's interesting. It's very interesting for me to see how the traffic from one side of Oak Park to the other side of Oak Park, it's not the same.
Right.
Hey, Brian, I appreciate the invite to the meeting, buddy. Thanks for giving us the info and the city as well. I just had a question. We're new to Fry here and are next door to Charles, right across the street from Brian as well. And we noticed one of the unique things about our property when we got here was that the sidewalk lends itself off Oak Park in front of Charles's house there on the corner of Oak Park and Fry, as well as extends itself through our residence, but then stops. And so I didn't know if there was future plans for sidewalks down Fry or why we had them to begin with. The only reason I asked is because, again, there is some pretty quick traffic on Fry, like it's a race to the stop sign at Oak Park. But I didn't know if they were going to continue that project down Fry, and if not, I just more than anything wanted to get some resolution there.
Sure. So yeah, as a city, when the city was founded in the first many decades of City of Boerne, people didn't put sidewalk anywhere. And then it's something we slowly started adding little sidewalks, little 3-foot sidewalks, then we do 4-foot sidewalks, and now kind of 5 and 6-foot sidewalks are kind of our more standard in the residential areas. So with new development, we make new development put sidewalks in. And so that's why you see sometimes where people are taking a one lot and dividing it into 2 or 3 lots. That'll trigger the new development rules where they'll have to put sidewalk in as part of that new development. Then separately as a city, for several years in a row now, we've been doing sidewalk design and construction projects all over town, kind of based on a priority list that we were given by the Alamo Area MPO. It's kind of what we're using as a guide. And now more recently, we did a mobility master plan at the beginning of this year as well. That has kind of a guide of what the feedback we received at the time, what order of sidewalks and stuff we should be working on. The current construction project we have now is not going any further north on Fry than what's out there. So it really was just putting sidewalk along Oak Park from Main to the intersection with Fry, because there was already sidewalk on the eastern leg of Oak Park. And then we put, as it's already built, we put it down Fry all the way down, connecting to Bandera, and then connecting that point to where some of like the Kronkowski and some of those other high pedestrian areas were that we were trying to connect. But it's something that we continue. So every year we're in the middle of city budget cycle right now, and it's something we turn in as staff. We turn in, maybe we want to go design sidewalks here, and then hopefully it makes it into the council approved budget, and then we'll get it designed. And then the next step is getting council to approve us to go build it. So it's kind of a multi-step process, but it's something staff recommends areas to council, and it's definitely we get feedback from council as well on where they want sidewalks to go.
Okay. Thank you.
Jason, we're trying to, one of the things with the platting, we try to get them to quit doing this piecemeal requirement on platting with these sidewalks, because it does create this kind of hodgepodge, type thing where, where it's kind of like what you have, you just end up with nothing, and then you'll see other areas where you see a sidewalk, it has a blank and there's a sidewalk on the other side. So I think the city's, at least my experience observing, they're trying to correct that and trying to figure out.
So we, with one of the code updates a year or two ago, we added a fee in lieu of sidewalk. So still the developers have to put sidewalk in, but if they choose, they can just give us, we have a set and kind of equation, they give us money. And then that's something as a city, we go, instead of having a little piece of sidewalk that doesn't connect to anything, we can get enough of those together and we can go do a big sidewalk project that actually connects. It's kind of the general concept behind that. So we're still getting funds from developers or people when they're doing projects, then we're just able to use it, something for hopefully a better project than a little piece of sidewalk that doesn't connect to anything.
Gotcha.
I had a question. I'm sorry. I had a question about the sidewalks that are currently that you guys are doing on Oak Park. I've measured some of them and they're not ADA accessible because they only are, some of them are 32 inches and 30 inches and not 36 inches with those mailboxes in the middle. Is there something that's going to be done with that to make those accessible? Because even like a mom with a double bob stroller, some of those they can't get through because they're not all exactly the same.
So the federal and state ADA minimum is 36 inches, as you mentioned. Right. And so I know our inspectors are out there watching it get built. And I know that's something that's come up recently. And I know they say they've measured everything at 36, but if there's any particular locations, we can go look at that in further detail.
Yeah, because one of the main issues is the mailbox. There's a 4-inch piece of wood sticking out of the back that it impedes that. And then there's a part of that there's a curb on some of the houses for some reason that takes another 3 inches. So at some point,
I know
it's
exactly
only 30.
where you're looking at. Yeah, we'll look into that. And then just so we have the inspectors watching it, and at the end of any of our city projects, we have a ADA consultant that comes out and gives us reviews the whole thing and gives us a letter saying it meets something. But yeah, it's definitely something we can look at that location in detail. Because I know there's that little wall, just because there's a grade issue where the lot in that little area, the lots are higher than the sidewalk, or most of the areas, the lots are lower than the sidewalk. They had to put that little wall in. But yeah, we'll have them look at that in more detail.
Okay, yeah, and I was just thinking further, any other additional sidewalks is putting those mailboxes perpendicular or parallel to the street. Which in town, there's some that are like that, I think on Blanco. Makes a lot more sense because then you get almost the whole 60 inches of sidewalk versus the 38 inches.
So
Yeah, that's something that we were gonna contact the post office and see if that isn't acceptable. I know people have done it, but just to make sure that that's acceptable to them because it doesn't meet their criteria online. But if our local post office is okay with it, we can consider that option.
Thank you.
now I know one of the post office, post mailbox issues we always have in true new development, they will not allow individual mailboxes anymore. And it's always a fine line when we do some of this redevelopment effort. Because I know most people don't want to lose their individual mailbox and go to a big cluster mailbox that you have to walk down the street to get, like we use in new developments. And that's something we're always very careful with the post office because we don't want to be the person that takes away your mailbox. So that's something as a city we're careful with.
I guess one additional thing for everyone that's gathered here, I've always thought of this street issue as being a catalyst for maybe creating a neighborhood organization for Oak Park. One of the things to get done with the city is when you have one voice, and I'm not talking about like an HOA where you nitpick because somebody's too loud next door. I'm not talking about that sort of thing. But when there is a major issue with respect to, say, speeding on a road or safety related to an intersection, when you can speak with one voice, especially at a council meeting or at any kind of meeting with the city government, it has a much more, it has a ringtone that certainly goes much deeper into the heart of the matter. So I would like to let everyone know that potentially we can allow this to maybe be something in which we create a neighborhood association, and then we do go as a unit to meetings or something like that in the future to have a voice. I know that a lot of people didn't know about this meeting today. I know there was an effort, but a lot of I literally canvassed the street today and talked to people, and a lot of people didn't know about it.
No, I appreciate that, Dr. Fowler. And I want to say that I heard someone mention at the beginning, the council district lines are very weird along Oak Park. In general, all of the north side of Oak Park is Councilman Bryce Bodie, who I heard you guys mention earlier. And then some parts of the south side of Oak Park are Councilman Quentin Scott. And so I would say in general, all of our council people here in Boerne are very much like to hear from their constituents. And so if you guys please reach out to them, and then they'll let us staff know what they want them to do. So it's something that that Dr. Fowler knows from his past council duties, that definitely the council interaction is definitely something they like to hear from the public.
And we also can have a neighborhood meeting sometime and invite the police chief to come to that.
Yep.
And also the fire chief, which would be a good thing.
Hey, Brian, Jason and Tiffany Cohn here. For what it's worth, we think that's a great idea.
Yay, good. Well, maybe I'll put a big sign on my fence one day and we'll have a Saturday morning.
I say we do it at your house.
I'll get Ty at Cibolo to bring a food truck or something.
All right, brother, that's good.
All right. Jeff, does anybody else have any additional comments? I'm not trying to, I'm
I
sorry.
have one question that I'm just curious about. I'm Cindy Fowler. I live at 441 Oak Park. And this lower street that Tristan lives on, where there's the lower part of Oak Park. What is the ordinance that allows such a narrow street to be able to park on both sides? And I've noticed, I just looked the other day, the line at which the apartments park, the cars are always over that line. So it doesn't even look like it was originally meant to be parked on.
It's always been parked on.
Yes, that's a great question. I'm loading up my aerial map right now. But in
I
general,
measured it, it's 36 feet across.
yeah, so 36 feet is our standard, until recently, our standard street section. That so anytime there's a new, again, as we talked earlier, Oak Park is not on the thoroughfare plan. It is not classified as a bigger, higher road. So whenever whoever built that section of Oak Park, because that wasn't, again, the old original road into town is Fry, and you made a left and you turned onto Oak Park. So decades later, they built the rest of Oak Park out to what we now call Herf. So when they built that at a later date, 36 feet was the rule that they had to build it at. And 36 feet allows for parallel parking on both sides and two-way travel down it. And so that's something new neighborhoods all over town. If you go to any of the new neighborhoods, 36 feet is the standard size that streets are built at.
Okay, I was just curious.
Well, given the traffic numbers of over 4,000 a day, I'll tell you what, considering that to be a one-way street on Oak Park, I think is probably one of the better ideas I heard today.
Yeah, I agree.
And we don't have many one-way streets. We have one or two that I know of off the top of my head, 2 or 3 one-way streets in town. So it's not something that'd be the first in town by any means. It's something that.
No, there's one right in front of the county courthouse.
Correct, that's one of them. And then over north of Middle School North is another. So that we have a couple in town, so it's not a brand new concept for us.
I think one of the things I also am concerned about, Jeff, is in the condominiums that are along that lower part of Oak Park. We know how our neighborhood's changing. It's amazing what's going on in this neighborhood. There's a lot of, let's just face it, there's a lot of money being spent in the development of this neighborhood. And we have a lot of residents along Oak Park that have, I know, lived there for 30 to 40 years. So we have history, we have this new evolution, but we also, on the condos in the rental there, I know that those are primarily owned by one individual. And so sometimes representation of renters is not very good because they sometimes don't get as involved as an owner might be. And so I just want to also remember that that stretch of Oak Park has a lot of individuals that aren't necessarily raising their voice, and there's different reasons for that. And we need to remember that. And because sometimes I think things kind of get, pushed to the side when there's not great representation. So I just wanted to know that, we'll be fighting for all the folks renting in the condos just as hard as all the folks that have bought and, are living there. Okay.
Thank you. And so I'll add, I really appreciate Dr. Fowler. I really appreciate you letting people know. I will say I chatted with our communication staff. So we, as a city, we put this meeting, we have bond meetings every month. So we kind of built it into our city calendar there. So I don't know if anyone received text message or phone calls through our communication staff. But supposedly that happened through our utility system because you're all utility customers. So I don't know why that didn't happen. And then I believe there was a post on Nextdoor as well, but it sounds like in my mind, this sounds like we're going to do some speed data and we're going to do some other stuff. We'll chat with PD. So probably in a month or two, we might have another meeting and we'll work with our communication staff to see what we can do to really.
I also recommend, and I know it's sometimes tougher, but I think it's a fairly civil crowd. But I think a face-to-face at City Hall might be a great way to do the next meeting too. Unless, it's supposed most people want to just do Zoom. I know there's a convenience factor.
No, it's always interesting. I mean, for me, we do public meetings all the time, and whichever one we don't do is what people want us to do. So it's if we do them in person, we get a lot of complaints. It's tough with kids and sports and whatnot. That it's tough that they can do a Zoom meeting. If we do the other one, it's same deal. If we do it in the daytime, if we do it in the evening, either way we get complaints. So it's just we're trying our best to find what the best participation we can get.
Wow, I appreciate the effort you've done tonight. Appreciate it a lot.
Any other questions, comments for the notes? I'm taking plenty of notes tonight. I really appreciate all the feedback.
All for me.
Well, we really appreciate everyone for participating. As a city, we always love participation from the citizens. And so, yeah, please feel free. Or so again, my name is Jeff Carroll. So I'm the Director of Engineering and Mobility. And so we also had Cheryl Rogers here. So she's the city engineer that works in the department. So you can find us on the city website. If you ever have any traffic mobility questions besides Oak Park, please feel free to reach out to us as well. Thank you very much, everyone.